All right, welcome. And today is Monday. This is my second attempt to make the video. Texas is receiving a lot of awful weather, and I live out in the country. Cat parts, power goes down. So we just got hit. I'm gonna try again, and let's pray there's no lightning or other storms. We're gonna stop the video. A few introductions. My name is Jay. I'm the owner of sectionandconsulting.com, and today I'd like to discuss your many options for vouchers, housing, subsidies, and the many different types of programs and what they really fundamentally mean. I also want to give you the federal definitions. That way you're very clear about what you're attempting to do, what you're seeking, and what are you wanting to achieve in terms of utilizing a federal system to assist you with rent, vouchers, and programs. All right, moving on from there. Today, I have categorized a lot of these items into different subsections so you understand where the programs and vouchers and subsidies are kind of aligned. Many of you fundamentally believe that the local housing authority, the people that qualify you for vouchers, that's your only option. It is not. There are many different options that work many different ways, and they're all federally funded. There are even county and state options, but we're not going to include those because taxpayers are fickle people, and when they decide they don't like something, then it could leave you in a precarious situation where your rent doesn't get paid, you receive an eviction, or even violate your HAP contract. So county and state-funded programs, in my mind, are just worthless in terms of talking about. All right, moving on from there. So the first thing we're going to address is going to be the elephant in the room, and that is the housing authority. In principle, they offer two wondrous options. Number one, the Housing Choice Voucher, formerly known as Section 8. The Housing Choice Voucher, contingent of your answers when you apply, the answers that you give in that application will determine what you qualify for. What I mean by qualifying for is when housing authorities receive funding for a number of different issues. So the feds and Congress vote money in, and they want to give out $1 million to the homeless, $2 million domestic violence, $4 million for veterans, and so on. Each line of funding is a separate opportunity that you're actually, when you give that application in, that you could potentially register for and gain some priority. So a person, if they have funding for veterans, seniors, and homeless, the more of those you're able to touch, the more preferential you're going to be, and also the more opportunities to win the vouchers, simply because you're able to pull from the separate funding levels. The sad part about this is in most cases with a housing choice voucher, housing authorities must open up to everybody, even if you don't even really have a chance in hell of getting it. So in other words, whatever funding they have that month and what's behind it will determine really who gets it and who may languish on a list. So two programs especially I want to discuss that are subcategorized as HOPWA. And I'm going to pull out the federal definitions and read them up to you real quick. So HOPWA is going to be the Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS or HIV program. It is a federal program dedicated to the housing needs of people living with HIV and AIDS. And this is going to be usually run through family, friends, and organizations. So HOPWA, those that carry the program may be administered through PHAs. The other is going to be Foster Youth Independence, or FYI, and that is an initiative that makes the Housing Choice Voucher assistance available through public agencies in partnership with the Public Child Welfare Agencies, or PCWAs. And so anyone that is 18 years old, not more than 24 years old, that is aged out of foster care, when you're applying at a housing authority or through your social agency, this will grant you an opportunity. Now, beyond those two subcategories, housing choice vouchers covers everybody, provided you're low income. Every housing authority, from 1 to well over 3,500 around the nation, determine through their administrative plan what they may call a priority for that month. So the housing authority in New York and Bronx may have different priorities than those that are in Tampa, Florida. That's what's so important to understand what they consider a high preference, and also what they're being funded for that month. The only way to get that kind of information is really a really good consultant like myself, or do an open public request to determine how they're receiving their funding, for who they're willing to fund vouchers for, and obviously what those preferences are. In other words, preferences really mean prioritizing you. The more the categories you match, the greater the opportunity to get the voucher. And in some ways, it statistically puts you higher or lower on the waiting list, depending on the demand, okay? Now, for those who live in a metropolitan area, homelessness does put a very heavy burden on some PHAs or public housing authorities. So I'm going to stop here and there because it's going to be a bit of a video. I'm going to warn you guys, there's a lot to cover. So this would be, for those of you who have a short attention span, I would say just bookmark or favorite or like the video or whatever. That way you can go back to it and see it and get the information you need in shorter segments for those of you that don't like to watch videos for too long, okay? So recognizing IRIS-Q, is the Section 8 program currently open in New York? Well, IRIS-Q, there is no national list of open and closed housing authorities, so I couldn't tell you. Also, housing authorities have changed in their methodology for opening and closing. In other words, in the old days, they would collect federal funds for a decade and they hand out 3,000 or 4,000 or even 50,000 vouchers. These days, they can open and close it they can open up for a couple of days and then close instantly. So it does no good to ask that. You really do have to check the website part. And onenewyork.com is usually the website which determines whether they're open. I'm going to call you Asep. I hope I'm getting that right. It's a cool name. However, I don't know how to say it, so please do forgive me. Do you think I could use a voucher to get into a rent-to-own property? Well, a voucher is a voucher. It doesn't matter. If you're asking if you're going to be the one renting to own, then no, because Section 8, well, it's not called Section 8. The Housing Choice Voucher Program is designed for those that are going to utilize a voucher at a landlord, or B, through project base. And so let's discuss that briefly, and I'm going to answer the rest of the questions here. So the housing authority offers many different options. One, they give you a voucher, you go out and seek a private landlord. B, the housing authority has bought a bunch of properties and they have project-based housing. In other words, not only the people that give you funding to pay your rent, but they're also the people that become your landlord. That's usually a terrible idea. I think we all know what project-based is. For those of you that participate in the HUD home ownership program, for those of you that want to utilize your voucher to pay against you purchasing a home, which means instead of you using your voucher to pay the landlord's mortgage, you'd be paying it against yours, then you would be participating in the HUD homeownership program. Not all housing authorities carry it. In fact, probably only about 15% of them around the country do, and there's no national list for it. So it's kind of a tedious process to locate housing authorities that actually offer that, and many of them do require you also to go through another separate FSS, which is Family Self-Sufficiency Program. And I don't want to get too deep into that, but that's what it is. Okay. So those are your real options there. Housing authorities do not have emergency housing vouchers for those that are fixing to ask that question. The red pill, I appreciate your time. Well, I appreciate you joining us. It's always useful for me to know the content that I make as a consultant is important to you guys and actually does something other than entertain, because I'm not a very good entertainer. Elizabeth Sendall, or is your income as a senior or Social Security? Well, it seemed like that's a personal question, Elizabeth. Could you rephrase that way I can understand totally what you're asking there? And while you rephrase, I'm going to revisit our list of things we need to cover today. So I think we're clear now. There's a couple of options through the housing authority. You can take a voucher for a private landlord. You can rent from the housing authority's properties, and that makes it project-based. You can participate in the HUD homeownership program. For those of you that are families and still working and not retired, senior, or on a fixed income, then you can participate in a program called Family Self-Sufficiency, which is FFS. And then there are some other more obscure programs, but I would say it's not worth mentioning unless you live in a rural area. All right. All right. Elizabeth chimed back in, and I think she's giving us some clarity. To consider, do they consider your savings when you're applying for a voucher? Well, let's look. That's called income and assets. So when dealing with the vouchers, they're going to look at the rolling history over a year of your income. So a lot of you guys will be, oh, well, I had a lawsuit I won and I've got 50,000. I won from that, so I might not be able to get a voucher. That's not true. They're looking at your total income for the year and then dividing it out by 12. And usually, depending on the housing authority, and remember that the amounts of money you're allowed to have in your bank account before you're disqualified change literally from every housing authority. If you're in another area like the East Coast where everything is super expensive, it may be permissible to have 100,000 in savings. It could also be permissible if you make almost 92,000 a year and still be considered low income. Same thing in San Francisco. While you may live in Jackson, Mississippi, they may have an argument with you having 30,000 in bank account. The only real way to know, Elizabeth, probably is to talk with a consultant when you have time, or book an appointment with our office. We can discuss what you have and whether or not it would qualify you for the specific housing authority, or you can visit your local housing authority and talk to them, but you may find that to be a rather perilous activity. Keep in mind that housing authorities are federally funded to A, give out applications, B, receive your response, and C, issue a voucher if you're qualified. They're not very good teachers, and many of them don't like answering the phones, and even worse, in some cases, they may even talk to you badly. It just comes down to a tough system, and that may be a culture shock for many of you that deal with other federal agencies that are very professionally run. But remember that housing authorities don't have federal employees. These are privately owned or city owned. That means that any hooker can sign up to be a caseworker. And so you may find the conversations get a little bit shady. So don't be shocked by that. Don't go into this talking to the housing authority and get all offended if they somehow convey to you they don't really give a damn whether you can live, breathe, or die. Okay, that's just the reality of many hardcore housing authorities. Many more keep it professional, but I can't guarantee the kind of response. I can only tell you, we're dealing with 1,000 clients plus a year. About half of them tell me that they've been talked to pretty badly, or they just can't even get a straight answer out of anybody. It's very speculative, and that's how it goes. James Salmon, I always love when, well, I hate that. They have something in front of the comments. I can't quite hear when you're always on very knowledgeable. Well, I appreciate that, James, a compliment there. So just a quick recap. Housing authority, couple things. The Housing Choice Voucher for anybody from 18 all the way up, including people aging out of foster care, as low as 16. All right. The secondary options, project-based housing. That's when the housing authority gives not a voucher, but they actually give you funding to move into their property they own. Terrible idea to give the very people that are in control of your voucher, also making them your landlord, because it does reason if you ever made a complaint or they decide they don't like you, there could be prejudicial behavior. And that's why you probably don't want a housing authority to be also your landlord. And not to mention, they tend to group or people together, more problematic people that may have a higher pretext for prostitution, gang activity, and drug activity into project-based housing. So if they can easily see that a client's going to be problematic and they have no other choice but then to offer something, they may not offer the voucher, but project-based housing. It's a lot easier to keep all your prostitutes, drug dealers, and drug addicts and properties run by the housing authority than to give them the choice to terrorize a private landlord with a voucher. I hate to say that, but that can be a cold and very stark reality. For those of you that have recovered or changed your life, I'm glad to hear it. I'm not trying to judge anybody, but we do need to understand the facts. We live in the real world. Despite federal rules and policies, it doesn't mean that the boys and girls that work at the housing authority need to be Christian or even make ethical decisions regarding your case. Never confuse a human's ability to be nasty, mean, or underserving, okay? Never just presume they're going to do the right thing. You'd be foolish to think that. Moving on from there, low-income housing, affordable housing. Low-income housing, affordable housing, and subsidized housing. These are not vouchers, folks. This is a situation where you're going out to a private property and you're not holding a voucher. You're going out to a private property that has engaged in agreement with the U.S. government or the feds to receive tax credits for allocating a certain number of units to those that are low income. Here's an example. Bob owns a building. There's 100 units. He's not taking vouchers. He's just simply going to allocate 50 of those units to those that are low income. You drive to that building. You tell them, hey, I'm low income. I want to apply for a low income, affordable housing or a subsidy. Then you show them your income, you show them your age and information. And what you're doing is you're renting a unit that is funded. So say they give you that subsidy in that low income housing. You move into unit A. That funding's attached to that unit. The minute you move out, you start your search and look all over again. It's not a voucher. Now, this may be ideal if you're elderly, old, and you don't plan to move. It can be a trap as well because subsidies and low-income housing are a lot like project-based housing. They're very different. One's owned privately, the other one's owned by the housing authority. So let's make that distinction. Project-based housing is buildings owned by the housing authority. Bad idea. Subsidies, low-income housing, and affordable housing are all the same thing with different names. These are private landlords participating with tax credits, and you move in that property. You'll see a lot of parallels between that of what the housing authority does and what private landlords do. They're usually not that good of properties, but many of them can be. I'm seeing more and more uppity properties where they're run better, but the problem is, they're basically, because of the pricing and the rent that they're wanting to charge and the requirements, they're only wanting to take the best. Those with the highest credit scores, those that are only $1 under what would be considered low income. So they're only going to want to choose the finest of the group to move into their nice buildings. And so it becomes prejudicial, doesn't it? And so we have project-based, and when a private landlord owns the property and it's a subsidy, it becomes tenant-based. Project-based, tenant-based. No vouchers required. Now, some of you might argue, hey, Jay, I've been to a low-income property. I have been to a subsidy property. I've been to whatever you'd like to call it property. And they allowed me to apply for both low income or utilize a voucher. Some of them are what they call mixed use buildings. And to further blow your mind up, let's get into the subcategories of Code of Federal Regulation that allow for certain sub-designations of property. So we have tenant-based housing that is low income, affordable, and a subsidy. You apply there, but it turns out they are sub-designated Section 811 or Section 202, which means that the units are specifically under Section 811 for those that are 18 to 61 that are disabled, or the property be sub-designated Section 202. And that property is specifically and only for those that are 62 years and older with a disability, and it comes with wraparound resources. And to better understand Section 811 and Section 202 of Code of Federal Regulation, let me give you the very brief explanation under federal rules. So Section 811 is supportive housing for persons with disabilities program. HUD provides funding to develop and subsidize rental housing with the availability of supportive services for very low and extremely low income adults with disabilities. Section 202 is described as a program that helps supply affordable housing with supportive services for the elderly. And that goes on as options allow them to live independently in an environment that provides supportive activities as cooking, cleaning, transportation, and elect. And what that means is not only would you be renting as a senior in the 202 property, but it could have Meals on Wheels and other things. Okay, so it includes other things. Now, I want to discuss real quick many families that reach out to our company, Section 8 Consulting. Look, if your loved ones have dementia, or I'm trying to think of the other name. You have dementia and Alzheimer's. People that are going to live in subsidized property must be of sound mind and body. You cannot simply pawn off your mom you can't stand or your dad, okay? I understand we all have family members we can't stand, but we have a social responsibility to care. We're especially mean in the U.S. compared to most countries. We don't like taking care of our elderly. Look, if they got those two things, it's not going to work out, okay? You cannot just put somebody that's not connected to reality to go rent a property just to get them out of your house. So I want you guys, for those that are considering that, to stop contacting my office. We're not going to do that. I'm not going to engage in that kind of unethical, unmoral, and illegal activity, okay? Cannot help you do that. Now, if they're still functional and on the way, there is a potential that could be a start while we look at options through Medicare that would allow some assisted living or nursing care as an expansive way. But to simply put somebody that's flat out not connected to reality in a property and then forget about them, no, I'm not gonna engage in that behavior with any client. Okay, so please do not contact my office with an attempt to do that. So Section 811 202 properties can be actually really good now compared to all the rest. So if you think of a private landlord offering subsidies and low-income housing, there's a general mix where anybody can. There's 811 where those are just people out there that are anybody but under 61 to 18 to 61, but they have to have disabilities. And for seniors that don't want to deal with younger groups of people, Section 202 could be most appropriate at 62 and older. Plus, you get a lot of wraparound resources. And let me give you some friendly advice. If the local people bring you Meals on Wheels or free soap and you don't like it, you graciously accept, you grin, and then when they drive off, throw the damn thing in the dumpster, okay? Don't offend people. Just don't do that. You're already in a position where you're there and you're trying to keep it friendly, so try to be diplomatic. If you don't want the Meals on Wheels, give it to somebody else. Please do not go in there and piss a bunch of people off that are trying to help you, because in the long run, they can end up hurting you, okay? So that's not the time to have a lot of pride. Just accept whatever they're offering and do it graciously. A lot of people do this stuff because they want to help, and it makes them feel as good as it might make you. So if you don't need it, just wait, okay? I had one lady, she talked a bunch of trash. I understand it. She has a difficult life as a senior, didn't have a lot of money, and then I went over there and talked badly to the worker. And then, of course, that was the last time they offered her anything. And as she got older, she regretted that deeply. So please, let's try to act human, okay? Everybody's come from a former life. Many people had former careers of owning companies, being engineers, and maybe due to poor planning or bad investments, you've somehow ended up with a voucher. It doesn't mean that your sense of entitlement should roll out to abuse those that are trying to help you, that don't know who you used to be. We all used to be something. I've had and have not so many times that I can tell you stories. That's life. If you haven't been brought to homelessness at least twice in your life, you haven't lived yet. All right. So that covers voucher systems and housing authorities. Now we private the poor property, mixed use property, Section 811 property, and Section 202. There are Section 811 or Section 202 vouchers. So don't run into the housing authority and feel that the workers are lying to you. They don't have those type of vouchers. Those are actually subsidies. Let's talk about a submarket for those of you that are United States veterans that have served in any of the four categories of the military or the Coast Guard. Okay. If you have, then HUD-VASH, but it requires that you have some type of honorable discharge. If you can do that, then many larger PHAs will have a HUD-VASH representative at the PHA or representing in the PHA, or you may go to your local VA and have a discussion there. I've gotten mixed opinions. The bigger the city, the bigger the VA, the more shitty things tend to be. You might have better odds at the local housing authority. Now, for those of you that live in a small city, you're probably going to have better odds dealing with the VA than you would the housing authority. You always want to look for whoever has the least amount of burden in order to go do this. Now, the HUD-VASH program, I'm going to read you the federal definition there, kind of describe what it is. So the HUD Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing, or better known as HUD-VASH program, combines HUD's Housing Choice Voucher and rental assistance for the homeless veterans with case management and clinical services. HUD-VASH is really designed for those of you that have reached a situation as a veteran where your rents become unaffordable, you may be becoming imminently homeless, or you have already become homeless. And in this case, it would require giving you a housing choice voucher. It carries a lot of preference because you've served your country, and gratefully so. So for those that have served, I appreciate your service immensely. That's the reason that we're able to walk around freely and not live in North Korea for now. Nothing against my North Korean folks, but certainly the leadership is not the best. Sometimes I feel like our own government's run that way. So the Veterans Program, for those that have a high potential for homelessness, I would recommend applying because the voucher is a little bit more powerful. They actually have a little bit more funding, and they seem to be a little bit more appealing to landlords because they can pay up to 125% over market. So if you're a veteran, you should step on the gas and consider asking or inquiring about HUD-VASH. If any of these programs you guys have further questions, because there's always more. I mean, I can make 12 hours of video discussing every in and out of every program, but that wouldn't be beneficial to get lost in the mix. So now we're going to move down to a different system that most are unaware of, and then some may be aware of, and that is the Continuum of Care program funded by the United States government. That program is basically a Continuum of Care COC program is designed to promote community-wide commitment to the goal of ending homelessness. Now, I don't want you to dismiss this already because you hear the word homeless. We're all but an inch from that anyways. A couple of bad choices, bad investment, or maybe the rent goes up. The one thing that you fear the most, you could be very near. It only takes 5 minutes to become homeless. It can take years to unwind that, okay? So they have providers for state and local governments to quickly rehouse homeless individuals, families, persons fleeing domestic violence, and youth while minimizing the trauma, dislocation caused by homelessness to promote access and effective utilization of mainstream programs by homeless individuals and families to optimize self-sufficiency among experiencing home. So they do preach a lot about homelessness, but the reality of it is any of you that are near the point of unaffordability where you live and how you pay rent could qualify for this very easily. And under the sub program, which is known as Continuum of Care COC, I'm going to explain a few things about that further. You've got a couple of options through them. That's going to be the rapid rehousing, better known as RRH, is a program that helps people and families quickly leave homelessness and return to permanent housing. It provides short-term rental assistance over a 2-year period. Now, I want you to understand that it's a degrading rent. Let's say you got $1,000 in rent. They may pay $1,000 in January, $1,000 in February, $1,000 in March, and then after that, they may drop the amount they pay $100 by $100 each month going forward till basically there's no rent left. This is ideal for those of you that have hit a rough patch that are still working and able to rebound within 1 to 2 years. I'm not suggesting that all COC programs are going to allow it to go on for 2 years. Many of them may choose to spread their funding a little bit thinner by only offering options for rental assistance over a 6-month or even a year period rather than 2. If you get the full 2 years, then you're doing pretty good. And I think that they need to see and I think what a lot of that is they want to see what you're going to do with yourself. If you're going to be productive in the use of this monies to pay rent or whether or not you're just going to fool around. I think that if you can establish that you're on your way out of the situation, then they will continue to keep funding that up to 2 years. And if you're just going to sit around and drink a cold beer and sit on the sidewalk, then no, they're not going to do it. I did 6 months, they're going to get rid of you. Moving on from there, we have permanent supportive housing, PSH is better known. Now, I've had many clients argue that point with me, but permanent supportive house is programs offers assistance such as long-term leasing, rental assistance, supportive service to help households live independently and access health care. The services are designed to help people build independent living skills, connect with community-based health care, treatment, and employment services. PSH does not have to specifically be for those that are have mental health problems. In fact, permanent supportive housing is a lot like the Housing Choice Voucher. They give you the money and the voucher to go out and get permanent housing for the long term, which would qualify just about anybody from a senior to an 18-year-old. It doesn't have a particular brand or category, and you don't necessarily even have to be homeless. So it's an alternative method to bridge a gap much faster than waiting on your local housing authority, which could take anywhere from 6 months to several decades to give you a voucher. And it only requires that you demonstrate that you have financial hardship or you may be losing rent. So there's a lot of situations there. And then the final one is going to be the Emergency Housing Voucher Program, or the EHV. Now, many housing authorities in the past, prior to the post-pandemic, they offered emergency housing vouchers and their special use vouchers. Now, when the pandemic came, they issued 70,000, and that was a second tier or second category of EHV. Now, what's become interesting is the fact that EHVs are now basically given out through COC programs. Now, many of them play very, very clever in the way they tell people things. I had one client come back and say, "Oh, we don't have," they ended that with the pandemic. See, there's a difference when you're sitting in the courtroom and you're sitting on the stand giving testimony. There's the truth and there's the whole truth. And if you're not careful, a lot of what's being sold to you, you're believing that, you're believing without questioning. Whether you're dealing with a housing authority or a COC program provider, just because they tell you something doesn't mean it's necessarily true. Okay. Those emergency housing vouchers have existed since the program's been around almost. Now, what they're doing is they're telling you, yeah, the pandemic ones have been, that's true, but they're not telling you the rest. So they depend on ignorance of people not knowing to have you believe certain things. It just means they selectively want to hand them out to the people they want to hand them out to, or who they believe in the boardroom. They decide and vote on who believes they are worthy enough of them. But the reality of it is, emergency housing vouchers are on the basis of you taking and dealing with a separate. So you're dealing with COC, which administers systems like SPDAT, or Service Prioritization Decision Tool. That tool has questions, and each question you're able to obtain and get right will grant a certain number of points. When you tabulate or add up all those points, they go into a third system called HMIS, which is the Homeless Management Information System, more or less like a little algorithm. And the more points you earn, the more that they're able to determine what voucher you would get. Only under certain circumstances will you actually score high enough but you not get something, and that's where they may not have the funding. But funding is issued almost monthly, so what may not work at the end of the month may end up working at the first of the month. And the last thing I'd like to address today, under no category, is going to be PHAs or those dealing with domestic violence. All systems take that into consideration, whether it's a housing authority or COC. It's the most powerful preference anybody can have. And it's just like jet fuel. Not only does it make the housing authority or COC programs consider your case, but they must consider it twice. You must be considered twice as much as a candidate than in all others, despite you can beat out even seniors, cancer, all of them. So domestic violence is the most powerful of three top categories. The second most powerful is homelessness. The third most powerful is disability, established disability. And for those questioning the concept of disability, the Social Security Administration, if you have a disability check, you automatically qualify. But it does not require you to have one of those. See, Social Security Administration requires judges, lawyers, doctors, and all that to go give you some free money. HUD's a different federal agency, and its standard and idea and concept of disability is much lower. That means a lot of you applying for housing, which you fundamentally have dealt with for years, backaches, this and that, could qualify actually as a disability. But I don't want you to think that just because you're able to qualify as disabled through HUD, that would give you a great case to go run to the Social Security Administration and go grab a disability check. The rules are much tougher for Social Security because you're not asking for housing or a voucher, you're asking for money, and that requires the burden of proof. Only the burden of proof for HUD, being a different federal agency, is much lower, but still pretty tough. So I think the overall idea and concept is to understand what you would truly qualify for, looking at your timeline. How long do I really have before things explode and become dangerous for me and I become unhoused? And all those circumstances. And there's many, many more things to be considered in terms of time, the type of voucher, and what it's going to do for you over duration. And many of these things are only learned through a career, a duration of time. So those of you that are struggling with these different ideas and would like to understand all of your options, even the ones that are not listed here, because clearly I can't list them all, I'd say reach out to us, or any qualified consultant that deals in Section 8 or federal programs can discuss your options, see what would be the best way to deal with it. And again, whether you're dealing with trying to get housing, deal with subsidies, dealing with getting a voucher, trying to expedite your timeline, trying to create a better case so you have a more preferred outcome, whether you're dealing with a bad landlord, a corrupt housing authority. I cover everything that's under Section 8 programs, federal law. What I can't do is advise you about your taxes or Medicare. I know a lot of you guys think from one federal issue to another. I can't do that, and I cannot give you legal advice. That's why our office utilizes an attorney for the more extensive cases. That way we're able to have the right professional address the right issues, okay? Well, I've enjoyed talking with you today regarding some of the many programs out there, and there were roughly 138. I felt that these were the most prominent ones, and I'm pretty sure I've disclosed many of which that you guys did not even know about. This afternoon, we're going to make a video, and it will either be one or two things. We'll talk about a little bit of spicy, and that's where we talk about news regarding Section 8, where maybe a housing authority has been indicted, or other news that are important and exciting where they may decide to do away with vouchers and give out cash to people, or it can be quite reverse, and we may be discussing some open waiting lists. Afternoon videos are typically like that. I pull more or less a random topic, and I try to do it in 60 seconds. That way, even those of you with short attention spans have a reason to come and visit us. Well, I want to introduce you guys. I'm very excited to my Siamese cat. Now, many of you that have been hanging around our channel the last decade or so know I rescue cats and house them just like I try to house humans. And today I want to show you a pretty girl, or Blue Eyes, we call her. She's taking a nap here in the office. So if you'll bear with me, if you're a pet lover, you'll love this channel. If not, you'll find me irrelevant. Please do click off. Nancy and Bob are also, they have their own channel, and you can go see them. They are experts at fidget spinners on Mondays. Then they're an expert at disposable diapers, and then they become a master expert consultant in Section 8 on Wednesday. Like I said, YouTube's full of entertainers. I'm as far as I'm concerned, I'm not seeing any other consultants make videos, so I don't really know what these other people are talking about. Anyways, here's our Siamese. Let's see if I get the camera. Yep, I forgot the tree down this year. There she is. So she's taking a little nap. We found her on the fence line. Now, you know, there are people in the world that love pets, and there are those that don't. So when the people left their home, they kind of treated the cat like it was something they had purchased from the dollar store, and it was no longer convenient to bring her. So they just cut off the food and water and left her in an abandoned house, almost killed her, and I rescued her. She's one of many, probably over 30 cats over time that I've had to rescue, from everything from being burnt by cooking oil, broken backs, having cancer, abandonment, and even severe cases of abuse, including kittens. In this case, it was just a poor cat that trusted a human, and look what it got her. So we give her a forever home. That way she'll leave this old earth, and she'll leave here understanding not all humans are trash. All right, guys, I've enjoyed talking with you. And if you have questions, guys, always ask in the comment section. I've also put a detailed list of everything we kind of discussed. And we're going to get a little bit deeper into this in our next video. So hopefully you'll come join me tonight. Bye-bye for now.